just crunched a few simple numbers. I didn't do the type of work you do, of course, from an analytical standpoint. But, of course, Iowa, the concern from most fans this week is how does Iowa match up with the likes of Aiden Hutchinson and that impressive Michigan front? Certainly, Iowa's offense has been underwhelming all year. That's been well documented. There's no hiding that. They averaged 25.7 points per game as a team. That's Iowa in general. But keep in mind, those are skewed because, as you and I both know, that's an indication of how many points are scored as a team, but not how many points your offense scores.
Right.
The offense, if you just look at the offensive numbers, Don, and I'm talking about direct offensive scores. So that includes if the defense were to turn their opponent over inside their own 5, and the offense punches it in for a 4-yard run, that's technically an offensive score. So I'm taking those into account. But even if you take those into account, Don, if you throw out every defensive or special team score, Iowa's only averaging 21.8 points per game. To me, now you may say that's less. That's right around 4 points less per game. That's significant, which tells me that special teams and defense, we've said it all year, how big those two units have been for Iowa's success. So let's just dive into it. How does Iowa move the ball against this Michigan defense?
Well, I think the first thing we have to recognize, and I just finished looking at the game again, I'm talking about Michigan-Ohio State, Corey. I think one reason Michigan won is because Ohio State could not match their physicality. Michigan was the more physical team. That doesn't concern me. It concerns me a little bit because we pride ourselves in our physical play also. I saw Ohio State being victimized up the middle, a lot like we victimize people up the middle as well. So I think we're going to get tested inside, and they're going to get tested inside because I like the way we run the ball inside with our guards and our center, of course, our All-American center. So it's going to be the first thing we have to do is match their physicality. And that'll be a challenge to do that because they're a very physical team. So we need to play our most physical game of the season. And that simply means not getting driven off the ball, holding your ground on offense, and being able to maybe play with a little lower pad level and get a little more movement up front, get a little larger seam for our backs to get through. It means, of course, there's some finesse aspects to it also. It means being able to pass protect. And, of course, one problem when you're pass protecting, you can't afford to get overextended. You have to try to keep your weight back. But the challenge there is a guy like Hutchinson is a big physical guy. So some of the time, of course, he just bull rushes you in. In those situations, you have no choice but to get your weight down to be able to counter the physical move that he's trying to run right through your body. So it's going to be a challenge for our tackles. I think we're going to have to give them some help from time to time. It'll either be a tight end, maybe blocking full time, or at the very least chipping on both those defensive ends, especially Hutchinson. And beyond that, the backs are going to have to help out and chip also sometimes on the edge rushers. Another aspect of dealing with that, of course, is avoid third and long. We just need to be efficient on first and second down so that we don't have too many of those third and longs. I did notice, I think they're a little vulnerable to screen passes. I know that Klatt mentioned it. Is his name Klatt? Is that the color guy for the game?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, he's very good. The analyst mentioned that Michigan had been victimized throughout the year on some screen passes. And that only makes sense, of course, because they got a pretty ferocious pass rush. So one way to counter that, of course, is to run screens. And for that matter, maybe to run draws. We haven't really run many draw plays this year, but our screen game has been pretty good to us, and I would expect that you're going to see any number of screens out of us on Saturday. But it all starts with just being able to match the physicality. Beyond that, a simple parameter I don't mind sharing with you because it's even knowledgeable maybe to the average fan. Turnover margin, as you know, Corey, is very important in any game. In this league especially, it's important. So just going back and addressing that one parameter that I am willing to talk about, turnover margin this year, the team that won on turnovers, I'm looking at Michigan's 12-game schedule. The team that won on turnovers won 6 out of 7 games. There were 5 ties on turnovers, but of those other 7 games, Michigan won 6. Incidentally, the funny thing of it all, the one team that beat them on turnovers was Ohio State, and Ohio State lost. That's the one exception. So in that regard, every time, think of it this way, every time Michigan has won on turnovers, they've won the game. So it is imperative, and we don't want to be even. And I don't mind sharing this. I mentioned to Kirk, I said, I don't know that +1's going to get it done. You might need to have a goal of being +2 because Ohio State was +1 and still lost. So I think a safer route, if we could pull it off, of course, is to find a way to be +2 on turnovers. At the very least, we need to win on turnovers. Maybe +1's good enough. To be on the safe side, I'd rather have +2.
There's typically in those games that have either been close or the one loss for Michigan, there's been a quarter where they get pounded on the scoreboard. And so does Iowa have, I know that Nebraska game, for instance, 2 of those scores for Nebraska in that 22-6 quarter in the third quarter were 40-plus yard explosive pass plays. Does Iowa have, you think Iowa can pull that off? Are explosive plays, have those shown up in your analytics for Michigan?
Well, that's the mystery, of course, that we won't solve until Saturday night. I'd make the comment on the Monday morning radio show. I said, you've always heard me talk about game planning and how important it is. I said, here's the reality. If you're trying to solve a defense like Michigan, it's kind of painstaking to have to do it, but it's the right way to do it. You look through all the formation possibilities that present themselves to you, and I'm saying that because you're looking at all this video, and you're simply looking for, there might only be one particular formation where you feel they're vulnerable with how they're playing. They have a tendency, here's how they want to play this particular formation. It might be tied into the personnel that are on the field. I don't have access to all the cut-ups that our coaches do. But my point is, if you really think of it this way, Corey, you got to look under a lot of rocks to find an answer. And so you take every formation, and one of the simple things you do is you analyze, is there any particular formation where you feel like they're unsound with how they're playing? And if they are unsound with how they're playing, let's discuss how we're going to be able to take advantage of it. And it might even be more specific than formation. Maybe it's formation that's also tied into a specific down and distance. The most obvious probably being critical downs, third and fourth downs. So maybe on first down against this particular formation, they're in base defense, but maybe in third and short, they're willing to compromise that base defense. And that's fine. If you hope that nobody's taking advantage of it, because you see on film, here's a place where we can take advantage. And so in that regard, because you've looked long and hard for those situations, when that one time in the game it comes up, you're able to take advantage of it. I'll give you an example from the Nebraska game. The first time we were in short yardage on our first possession, you recall what we did on 3rd and 1. We threw play action to our tight end for a gain of 30. Remember that?
Lachey.
No.
Was it Laporta?
It was Laporta.
Okay.
It was Laporta, but it was a play action pass on 3rd and 1, and we hit on it. And that only took us to the goal line. Incidentally, today after practice, I did tell Laporta, the first thing I said to Sam, I said, Sam, for the record, that absolutely was a touchdown catch. And he smiled and he said, I know, Coach. And I said, well, just so you know, when I was grading it, I gave Alex a minus on that play because if he'd thrown you a better ball, there wouldn't have been any debate about it because you would have simply caught it and flipped it over to the official after you caught it and then had a celebration. But he threw a difficult catch for you. You still made the catch, but in the process, of course, you didn't have the ball possessed very long before you hit the ground. And, of course, it's still a mystery to me as to how they overturned that, but that's another discussion, I guess, that we might or might not need to have.
How much 21 personnel do we see from Iowa on Saturday? I'm assuming we're going to see a lot, but I asked that question because that also brings up if Alex Padilla is in the game, which I think both of us believe that Kirk will not be too hesitant to make that switch if things aren't going the way he expects or wants. But how much 21 personnel do we see in this game from Iowa? And again, with 21 personnel, I guess I should ask this question as well. I liked what I saw from Monty Pottebaum. I've liked him all year long. That run against Nebraska was impressive. Why not mix up a fullback run earlier in a set of downs? He's proven he can run. I think wouldn't that be sort of a safe play, but yet one that would catch Michigan off guard to run him on 2nd and 8?
Well, a good example, you mentioned Pottebaum last week, that play you're talking about. Just realized it was a short yardage play, as I recall. And that particular backfield action on the part of the fullback, and the quarterback is the same backfield action that complements belly pitch. Remember where you fake inside and pitch the ball wide? Well, this time we weren't faking inside. We were handing him the ball, and our linemen on the play side were actually giving the defense a false key. They were actually stepping left while Potterbaum's running right. It was actually influence blocks on their part. So it's good football that we did that, and that's one reason he was wide open. The tight end, as I recall, did have a key block to open the hole. He was blocking the edge guy, and the inside guys went chasing off inside versus those hats that went inside. The guard and tackle put their hats inside, and defenses typically read hats. Of course, if the lineman in front of them steps left, then they tend to mirror his movement. So it's good football to influence defenders every now and then, just to mess with their heads a little bit. That's what we did on that play. I do think you're right. I think we're pretty comfortable with two-back offense. It does present a lot of opportunities in terms of being able to run the ball up inside. Not that we can't do it out of one back, we can, but I just like it because it's old-fashioned football. And
I think that's the only way. That's the only way we're going to be able to run, in my opinion. And I'm not no expert. That's the only way we're going to be able to run is if we deploy 21 personnel with Potterbaum up the middle. I just think that's the road, and I could be wrong.
The one thing I'm sure of is we're gonna try to run the ball out of 21. I hope we're able to do it. If we're able to do it, that's a good sign because it still offers a lot of play action opportunities. You've heard me say before, if I had to play all day with one formation, I think I'd still pick a pro formation, 21 personnel. I like that personnel grouping for sure. It depends on your personnel, of course. If you can put three wideouts out there and maybe you don't have a great fullback, then maybe that makes more sense to go with what we call 11 personnel, one back and one tight end and three wideouts. But I think we're comfortable with 21 as a personnel grouping. And I think if we're lucky enough to run 21 40 times on Saturday, it probably means we won the game.